Okay, so
Do you hear me? I don't
back.
hear anybody. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
I don't hear anyone.
Okay, well, problems on your side. Okay.
I don't hear anything.
Okay. So just recapping quickly what we went over last time. I was talking about different about kalim. If a kli has been used for fleshik or molchik, what can you use it for parava? And the answer was yes. And between fish and meat, there was no concern. And there are a few more points that we wanted to talk about. There was cutting bread. You definitely, well, the same knife, you can't use the same knife used for unless you're going to have a perfectly clean knife. You can't use the same knife cutting bread that's going to from fleshik. A fleshik knife cutting bread that's going to be that's going to be used for a multika meal. Okay, and we spoke about neitza, the idea of stabbing the knife into the ground, which is basically equivalent to steel wool, because it gives you, if you give a knife a good scrub with steel wool, that will take off all the fatty residues, which is basically the equivalent of neitza. And okay, so of course nowadays a lot of these halachas were written in a time where people were a lot less affluent than we are today, and to get a sharp knife, you had to go to the market and find somebody who was a metalsmith who had worked on the thing and sharpened it. So not everyone had the means to have two sharp knives. But nowadays, where everything is cheap, we always obviously we have separate meat and milk knives, and that just makes things a lot simpler for us, and that is of course the minhag today. Okay, I want to give some review questions, which, as is my custom, I'll throw at everyone over here, and let's hear your answers to them. So the first question for you is: do I need separate glasses for meat and milk?
If they're cleaned in between, they should be okay. They're cleaned well. It's not our practice.
They're cleaned well in between, then they should be fine.
But the practice is really not to do that if possible. Practice is not.
A, it's cold. B, it's glass. It's extremely easy to clean and make sure that, and we've got dishwashers, and so okay. But nonetheless, there is a custom. Some people have the custom to have separate drinking glasses for milk and meat. But then you could use the same thing. You could even use a coffee cup that's usually used for coffee and milk to drink from during a meat meal. First of all, you're drinking something cold, so no blears come out. And secondly, there's probably no milk blears absorbs in the cup because the milk was added to coffee, which itself is a cliche and doesn't cook.
But wait, the coffee is hot. It's not cold.
Yes, but it's a cliche. The coffee is the coffee cup is a cliche. You don't put the coffee cup inside on top of the stove.
Right. Very megal.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you could make an argument like, let's say you put the coffee cup in the microwave. Possibly then you could have an argument that it's a clearation. But again, microwave cooking is not cooking. We remember we had a few weeks back we had a discussion about cooking in the microwave. If you cooked meat and milk together in the microwave, is that issa d'oraisa? And it wasn't so clear. It wasn't so clear that it was even. So there's I mean, I'm not saying that you should, but it's there's a lot of leniencies around the situation of microwaves because it's not cooking with fire.
Okay. You're talking about milchik and meat and milk, assuming it's kosher, right? In other words, let's say if you go to somebody's house and they're not, which happens, I'm sure to all of us, with family and business, you go to somebody who's not strict on kashrut. So they're also, I always remember hearing also, like if it's something cold, if they offer you a cold drink.
We're going to deal with that exactly in tonight's share. So I'll hold your question, okay? Because we're going to hit that subject exactly tonight.
We're not doing I thought we were doing udders at Nasdaq.
No, we're doing the other share.
Oh.
Okay. Next question. Do I have to wait 6 hours if I swallow a vitamin that is made with liver? So you swallow it. You're not chewing it. You're just swallowing it. But it's got liver is one of the ingredients. They've taken some sort of enzyme or whatever, or something that comes from liver, and you swallow that.
Something that you really
does that make you
need.
fleishik?
Something that
I'm not asking about the permissibility of the pill itself. I'm saying you had it. Now, are you fleishik?
No.
Why not?
Good question.
It's a pill. I don't know that there's a meat substance in it that's going to come out. You're going to absorb this meat substance.
Okay, so first of all, whenever we ask these questions, we've got to think about, okay, Rambam and Rashi. Basa ben Ishanaim. Is there any Basa ben Ishanaim? No, so we've ruled out Rambam. Now, what about Rashi? Moshech tam. Does it cause a fleishik taste to come back into your mouth? And the answer on both is no. There's no moshech tam. It's you just swallowed it, and there's no real mamashis of the meat over there. So it would not make you fleishik.
Wow.
Okay. Can I serve salad that was left over from a meat meal with a milk meal?
No.
What's your concern?
My concern is because we don't know what they might have. They might have used a utensil, a meat utensil, taking some of the salad. They might have
Good.
eaten
Okay, so that's thinking in the right direction. Fine. If people were using fleishik things, to stick into the chicken, and then they took the same things and put them into the salad, then for sure you've got a problem. What happens if you've got dedicated salad servers? You've just got plain, clean salad servers on the table, and it's would you still have the concern?
I would have that. I would have that concern because you're serving. Why would they use the milkic serving for the salad when they're having fleishik? Why would they do that? They're too, I mean, it's cold. Yeah, all right, fine, it's cold, but why?
We have a meal when we have our Shabbos meal. The salad stays on the table, and pretty much the whole meal, even though people are having meat or whatever. They might want to have a bit of salad after to.
Or for shalashuris, milk shalashuris or something.
Yeah. Okay. So he answers here, the serving spoons. If the serving spoons were only used for the salad, then it is mutar, and we don't have to suspect that meat fell into the salad. But if it was served with spoons that may have had meat on them, then it is asur. In any case, Igris Moshe, that's Rav Moshe Feinstein, says that it's a mitzvah min amuvcha to remove all food eaten with milk from the table if it is to be eaten with meat.
I was thinking.
Okay. Would it be Shaul? Would it be also the opposite scenario also? Meaning, if let's say Shabbos day by lunchtime, I'm saying let's say like we have cholent or chicken, and you bring in the salads, and then a lot of times whatever's left over, we'll have it for for shalashuris, the milchik shalashuris, to bring in those same salads. So I always understood that you have to take off those salads like before.
Yeah, so that's what Igris Moshe is saying, is that it's the best thing to do if you're intending to eat your salad later at a milchik meal, you should take it off the table before the meat comes on.
Okay.
That's praiseworthy practice. But if b'diavad you realize, oops, I didn't realize I left the salad on the table, and now I was hoping to use the leftovers for the milchik meal later.
Right.
Okay.
It's okay. Right.
It's okay. There's no problem to do that. See if there are any other questions here that so now if what happens if there's if salad was prepared in clean fleishik kalim? Okay, then for sure we know that you're not going to become fleishik from eating the salad. But if there is a bit of fleishik grease, wouldn't you become fleishik from eating that salad? And the answer here, I'm not going to let you go for this, but he says, he answers that the grease or the tiny particles from shawarma stands that go into the salads and such don't make a person fleishik. It's mamashis and it's not batal, but it's not basa ben ishinaim. It's certainly not going to get stuck between your teeth, and it's also not mashech time because it's such a small amount. I think we spoke about that in the last year. Okay, we're going to move on. the chapter about others, I'm going to give you really a quick al regel achas, just so that we don't completely skip it, and so that you know that there is such a thing. Just a couple of points here. Is that one that milk is only considered milchik if it was actually milked out of the cow while it was alive. Once the animal has been shechted, the milk that's stored in the udders actually min haTorah is not milk. In fact, it's fleishik. It's fleishik and milk. But so if you had to
That's
take
an
that,
interesting concept.
yeah, if you had to take that milk out, you would it could possibly even make you fleishik. Although again, if milk wouldn't make you, it doesn't have the moshech tam, so maybe it wouldn't. But it's but min haTorah, you would be allowed to eat. You would be allowed to eat the udder of a cow cooked in its own milk, in the milk that's inside the flesh. Now, the udder has got little pockets of milk all over from the mammary glands. So the cow that's shechted min haTorah, you're allowed to eat that udder. However, midrabanan, the Rabbanan are concerned that people aren't going to understand the distinction between shechted milk and milked milk, and say, oh, maybe udder meat is actually kosher to be eaten with regular milk, and that's going to be a big problem. So if somebody is so inclined to want to eat udder meat, there's a whole process that you've got to go through to get rid of the milk that's inside it. Basically, you have to cut it into strips, cut a hash pattern inside the thing so that you can actually squeeze it out. You actually have to squeeze out any milk that you can find, and it has to be barbecued so that any further milk drips out.
That's similar to cooking liver.
Right.
Yeah.
Liver. The problem you have is the blood. So
Right.
you have so the similar issue with liver is that you have to put it on a griddle and right. You have to put it on a griddle and barbecue it so that all the blood drips out.
Yeah.
Okay, same thing. So it's a similar principle with the milk in the udder, is that you want to cut it open and make sure that it all drips out. There's a whole sif in Shulchan Aruch dedicated to the udder, which as I said, it's not very practical. Rav Hanan said he went to one of these kashrus banquets where they had all these edge cases in kashrus and tried to make things kosher. And of course, one of the things they served was grilled udder, and he said it tasted like his tires retreads. So it's probably not worth all the fuss. It's interesting for all the halachic arguments that go into it and whatever, but if you're reduced to eating the udder of the cow, it means you're pretty much scraping the barrel. And this is, you're talking about a situation of dire poverty where you're doing things like eating a cow's udder and making pachar out of the cow's hooves. So it's a situation born of necessity where you can't waste anything.
In general, I'm just curious, in the market today, I don't know, in Israel or abroad, is there such like udders or something like being so, or it's usually just like when they shecht or kill the cow, that's like something in the market,
I think they just turn it into cat food or something. I don't know. I have no idea what they do with the offcuts of the cow that nobody eats, and I don't know if I want to. So, okay. So now let's move on to tonight's shiur, which is about meat and milk together, if it happens. So the Shulchan Aruch starts out. This is now talking in the Siman Tzadi Aleph, and Sif Aleph says that meat and cheese that touch are mutar. Okay, this is talking about. However, they need hadacha, rinsing, at the point of contact. It is mutar to tie them in one napkin because we don't worry that they will touch. So let's say you've got person's traveling and he's packing his lunch, and he's got a piece of cheese for his breakfast, and a piece of meat for his lunch. He can take them all in one cloth and wrap them up, because you don't have to worry that they're going to touch through the cloth. You obviously want to separate them. You don't want to put them, store them touching each other. But we're not really concerned, because we're talking about cold things over here. The source of this is actually a Mishnah, if you recall, Eliezer. We had this in Chulin, that the Mishnah says that a person can wrap meat and cheese in the same napkin as long as they don't touch.
That's right.
And the Gemara asks, and if they do touch, so what? What's the problem? Both of them are cold. To which Abaya answers in the Gemara, granted that they don't usher each other, or that you don't have to scrape off a clay clipper or anything like that to take it off from the point of contact, but nonetheless, you still want to wipe them off in case any sort of taste transfer has happened, if the one touched the other and left a little bit of grease on the other. So then you should wipe them off. Okay, that's all that needs to happen when you're talking about cold. When you're talking about cold, there's no taste transfer. Okay. Sif base in the Shulchan Aruch says anything that needs to be rinsed. For example, let's say you put cold kosher meat on a cold treif serving dish. Now, this is actually a pretty practical halacha, especially if you're traveling, staying in a hotel, an Airbnb, and mistama, all the dishes there are treif. Okay. Now, can you put your kosher food on those plates? And actually, yes, you can. So he brings a case over here. For example, if you put cold kosher meat on a cold treif serving dish, now the Ramah points out that the meat needs to be rinsed since it was put on a treif dish. Okay, so you don't want it to have absorbed anything from the dish, but it's asa to put these things lechatchila, because it might accidentally be eaten without washing. Okay, you're going to need to wash this thing. Okay, because it's been sitting on a treif dish, you're going to need to wash it before you eat it. And if it's something, okay, but this applies specifically to cooked foods that one doesn't normally wash before eating. But if you have something that is normally washed before being eaten, for example, raw meat or fish, right? You wouldn't take, you take the meat and you'd wash it off before putting it onto the tray and putting it into the oven. So in that case, you could even lechatchila take your raw meat and put it on the treif dish, and move it across. Okay. And this prohibition applies dafka, says the Ramah. It applies dafka to food that is slightly wet. But if the food is yavesh mamash, completely dry, and the kli itself was something that was only used for cold food, then it would be mutter to place something dry on the kli without hadacha. Then you can put dry things onto your kli, onto this tray for kli, which has only been used for cold, and you don't have to worry about any kind of absorption.
Including that, would that include pots, frying pans, pots?
So now frying pans and pots, remember, those are things that have been used for hot. So we're going to have to deal with those separately. Those are kli rishon. So when you're talking about, you going to the Airbnb and they've got a whole bunch of ceramic dishes. Now, this over here, by the way, we're going to see in the discussion is when do we talk about it? This is talking about where the kli wasn't washed properly, so there might actually be residue of treif on it.
Right.
And that's why, when you put it down, you have to be careful to wash it off afterwards. And you're only allowed to use it lechatchila if it's something that you'd anyway be washing. Okay, so you're not concerned about taste transfer because it's cold. Everything here we're talking about is cold. But if the dish itself is clean, then it doesn't matter, because there's no way that any kind of taste transfer is going to be affected from the treif kli into the kosher food.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, there's an interesting discussion over here. That's the let me just see the Torah brings from the Bala Itur that that even when food is placed in that when so the Gemara says that even when food is placed in a kli shel isur, then the food needs hadacha, it needs to be rinsed. So therefore, if the food will be washed anyway before eating them, it's mutar lechatchila to place it on this dish. But if it's not normally washed right before eating, it's also to place on the treif kara. This is where the Shulchan Aruch gets his halacha. He gets it from the Torah over here. Now the Taz, who's a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, says that the whole chiddush of this Bala Isser is that even though the treif kli is not Isser Ba'ain, it's not a solid piece of Isser, it's treated as Isser Ba'ain, and therefore it's Asr to place food in it. Okay. And the Torah Chatas brings the Bala Isser and concludes that lechatchila one should be machmir, but b'diavad it's mutar. Okay. Now it gets so the Taz quotes Maharshal that you have a traveler who's got some salted herring with him, and he wants to eat it on the plates of the goyim. Okay, he says not allowed. Why? Because they need to be washed before eating, and certain on the plates of sorry, just a second. Maharshal says travelers may not eat a herring on the plates of the Gentiles since they need to be washed before eating, and certainly not pickles because the pickled juice becomes us. Hold on, I'm going to skip this piece because I'm not saying it right. However, brings Chatas who holds that travelers. Travelers, this is actually quite an important point that I wanted to bring out tonight, which is brought in the Torah's Chatas, that in general, travelers are considered to be in a difficult situation, okay? And therefore, a traveler is already considered b'diavad. Okay, so all the things that we're very makpid on in our own homes, right? You would never have a treif kli in your own home. You would certainly never put your food on a treif kli in your own home. But you're traveling, you're on the road, and all that you've got to eat on are these dishes that are in the Airbnb. Okay, you're already in a situation of b'diavad, so we're going to give travelers a lot more latitude to do things that they would not do in their own home.
Isn't there a problem? You mentioned like herring with salt, just in fish.
Yeah, so the salt. Now that's one of the things. That the salt itself has a sort of chemical heat. Right. Which might bring out taste from the kli. Now that's possibly why the Maharshal is strict there.
Right.
Okay. So Mishpatzos Zahav asks on this that we just said that the travelers have the din of b'diavad. He said, why is it b'diavad? Let the travelers wash off the kli beforehand, and it'll be mutar even for salty things. Just give it a good clean. Okay, so he explains that even though it is washed, by herring it's asa since it's a davar charif. That's what we just said. There's the salt. Okay, so since it's a davar charif, even if it's clean, we don't want people to put things into this plate. You've got to, first of all, it's in a brine, so it's a liquid, which makes taste transfer a lot more possible. And the salt has that chemical property of being of making it charif and bringing out the taste that's in the kli. So therefore, that is a problem. But other foods, he says, can be placed even lechatchila on a clean treif kli if it's derech arai. Specifically, if it's derech arai, which means it's not a regular thing that you do.
When you said before the salt makes it treif, would that also go for onions, radishes, the same thing?
Right. So it's a little different. Because the onions and radishes are not, you're not taking the onion and rubbing it into the plate. You're taking a knife and cutting the onion. And then the cut onion just sits on the plate. There's no liquid there.
If it leaks liquid, if it does have liquid coming out?
If it's a charif liquid, if you like, I'm not sure what would be a good case of this. I'm just trying to think of all of the standard things like onions, garlic, lemons. There's some days that lemons are davar charif.
That's
So
it.
if so, let's just say if you say that lemons are a davar charif, then you might have an issue there.
Right.
That you've got to worry about the lemons, the juice going onto the plate. Yeah. Right. So that's so just to re-emphasize that last point that we made is that you can only use these treif kalim for yourself if this is a casual thing. It's not a fixed thing. So you can't if you buy kalim from a goy, you have to kosher them. You can't say, oh, I'll just keep using these. I'll just use these kalim for cold. Now this is now becoming part of your kitchen. If it's becoming part of your kitchen and you're using it on a fixed basis, then you cannot have treif kalim inside your kitchen. That's just not acceptable. But if you're in Airbnb for a week, you're allowed to use the kalim. And you don't have to kosher them if you're not going to be using them for hot.
That's why I use people when I go to like a hotel or motel where they have the coffee urns. They have the coffee pots there.
Patterns.
I don't know what rags they use to clean it. I don't know what's going on there, so I just don't.
What rags? What do you care about the rags?
Well, I don't know what they were wiping the table with.
Is the cup clean now?
I would assume it'd be clean, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is the cup a klirishon?
That would be a klirishon, yes.
Why would it be a klirishon?
Oh, well, no, it's a sheni because it comes from the
klisheni.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So first of all, the coffee cups are a klisheni.
Right.
So you have no. So it's considered that it's used with cold. It's not considered even though the coffee is hot and it'll burn your lips with it. But halachically speaking, we say that it's not. It doesn't actually cook and it doesn't absorb taste.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which means that you are. Which means that if you want to go into the hotel room and use the coffee cup that they've got over there, you've got, obviously you're going to have to, now it used to be that any coffee in the world was kosher, but now they have all these flavorings and whatever. So those are a little questionable. But let's say you've got some kosher coffee and you want to make a cup of coffee inside the hotel with their cups, you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to use their cups with hot water. Absolutely, even with hot water, because it's considered as a kosher kli. It was never used with hot. Okay, so maybe you're going to say, oh, well, wait, maybe some crazy guy came inside there, and he put it on he put it on the stove and put chicken soup inside it and used tray for chicken soup inside the thing and cooked it into the walls of the thing. And now I'm using this. You don't have to be choshesh for the meshugana. Okay, it's not something that normal people do, and if you don't have to, look for problems where there aren't any. If you knew for sure, okay, that's a different story. But you don't know, and there's no reasonable basis for suspecting that the cup was used for anything normal other than its intended purpose, which is making coffee. That was from
the snake with the venom.
I'm sorry,
It's like the snake with the venom.
The snake with the venom. Okay, the snake with the venom that's an issue of sakana,
right?
Which we're always a little bit more careful about. Yes, sakana is more serious than iser, so we're careful about that. Even though it's extremely unlikely that any snake came anyway.
I've tasted coffee that's a sakana.
Yeah. Okay. So again, using treif kalim. So there's a bit of lumdus over here, which the shach goes through. Which I'm not going to take you through all of the lumdus over here about it, but basically according to the Darkei Moshe, which is the original Ramah commentary, he first wrote the book Darkei Moshe before he made his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch. He said because Rav Moshe Isserles was he wanted to write a book of halacha, and he came out with his magnum opus, the Darkei Moshe, and then he discovered that in the meantime, Rav Yosef Karo had published the Shulchan Aruch, and he looked at the Shulchan Aruch and he said, "This is fabulous. This is the best book ever." And in fact, I'm gonna write my commentary on that. And he changed his whole tack from the Darkei Moshe into writing his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so this is the same Darkei Moshe who's writing the Ramah. The Darkei Moshe says that matzah can be placed in a kli of chametz. Finished. Matzah can be placed in a chametz kli, and it doesn't treif up the matzah. Why is this permitted? A, because only wet food is asur, but dry food is mutar, or B, because the kli was only used for cold chametz. By the way, I think I heard anecdotal stories of the Chazon Ish, who before Pesach, on Erev Pesach, would take his breadboard out into the street and dust off all of the chametz crumbs, give it a good wash, and you take that and use that as his board for the matzah at the seder table. Okay, you have to be kind of big shouldered to be a posek, as Rav Hanan pointed out in his. Were you in his share, Yaakov? You didn't go to the strawberry share. He says there's a famous statement that koach de hetera adif, that the power of heter is stronger, because why? Anyone can be a tzaddik and say I'm gonna say it's aser. I'm gonna treat it like it's aser. Yeah, you don't have to be a big lamdan to say, oh, I'm gonna be machmir. You want to be makel? Now you got to be a lamdan. You got to be a lamdan to understand how this is mutar. Okay. So when you hear that there's a great rav, like the greater the rav, the more likely he's going to have lenient opinions on things.
So true. Now, especially nowadays, so true. Yeah. People are so easy to be machmir, osir, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Now the Taz spots over here that there seems to be a contradiction between the Darkei Moshe and the Ramah over here. So basically, without taking you through all the lamdas over here, he says we have to actually amend the Ramah in our seif to say the following: that if the food is completely dry, or if the kli was only absorbed cold iser, then it's mutar even to place wet food without hadacha. So in summary, according to the Taz, if the kli was used for hot aser food, okay, so then we're talking about a kli rishon. So we're talking pots and pans that were used for iser in a kli rishon, okay? Then even that pot or that pan, you're allowed to put dry, cold food into. So if somebody's got a pot, you can put your fruit in it. You can put anything that's dry and cold. Store some biscuits in it or something like that. That's fine. Okay, dry and cold. And if the kli was only used for cold aser food, then you can use it for cold food, even if it's a liquid, or hot food if it's dry. So you can, again, if the kli was used for only for cold aser food, you can use it for cold food even if it's liquid, or hot food if it's dry. So for example, cereal bowls. Let's say you find cereal bowls in the Airbnb, and you want to have your cornflakes in the morning, right? You can put your cornflakes into there and pour the milk in, and there's no problem as long as it's clean. Obviously, it has to be clean, but you can put your cornflakes and milk into that bowl, and that's not a problem. And as a matter of fact, if it was only used for cold, you could even take your toast and put your toast onto that plate. Because if it's only used for cold food, or it's a cliche, it's just sort of a breakfast plate, you can put your hot toast onto that plate, no problem. Okay. Now, so the shach, that was according to the Taz there. Now the shach says that cold wet food can be placed in a kli that was used for hot isser if the kli is clean. Same, okay. Furthermore, wiping it clean is sufficient, and you don't even need to wash it. Okay. The Mechaber holds that cold wet food can be placed in a kli that was used to cook basa b'chalav even. So we have a variety of coolers that you have when you're in this sort of situation where you're a traveler and you want to use the kalim in the Airbnb or the hotel. Let's see. Now there's another exception over here that a kli cheres. I don't know how commonly you come across earthenware vessels nowadays. Nowadays, I mean, we do have kalim that are made out of earthenware, but they're glazed.
Like China.
China is glazed.
Yeah.
You have a glaze over it, so it's not really a kli cheres. Kli cheres, I mean, if you've ever been onto these archaeological digs or seen whatever, it's mamish oven baked clay without glaze. And they were very cheap. I mean, that was like the disposal ware of the time of the Mishnah. Was you have clay cheres, they would eat, they would break, they would throw them out and whatever, and they're impossible to kasher. Okay, so and when they broke, they would use the shards for writing notes to each other. So they were very easy to make and break, and they were treated as chadfami to some extent. Now, if you had such a kli nowadays, then it would even be usher to use it according to the Rashba, but even for cold, because it's for a couple of reasons. One, because the porous nature of it means that it's impossible to clean. So there's a concern that you'll have actual isser clinging to the plate, even if it's cold and you're going to wipe it off, and that's a problem. And when it comes to utensils that can be kashered, the assumption is that you're ultimately going to kasher if you were to keep it long term, then you would kasher the utensil in order to use it for hot. So we're not worried about the short amount of time before the actual kashering occurs. But earthenware vessels you can't kasher. So that there are two reasons. So I think the Chavas Das's reason is a little stronger for us nowadays. That it's just you won't be able to clean it properly. So okay, so it's a very badiavad thing if you ever came across a kli cheres that wasn't kosher to use it for anything. Spices, when we spoke about davar charif, that if the charif spices are wet, you can't put them inside any kli that absorbed any kind of isser, especially because the charifness improves the taste that comes out. So you're going to have a real shaila of isser in your food there. And once again, this whole situation is only when it's a temporary usage. If the treif kli is going to be used for cold food on a regular basis, then it should still be kashered anyway, in order to not to make a mistake of using it with hot food. Okay, that actually summarizes the share. Let me just see that. I think there was one more thing in here. Yeah, and the other point that we have is that one should be careful not to let meat touch bread, because that'll render it usher to eat with cheese, and one should be careful not to let cheese touch the bread, because that'll render it usher to eat with meat. Okay, I just wanted to say that because there's not much discussion on it, but that's just Sif Gimel. Okay, any questions?
Well,
okay. So let's just give you some review over here. Okay, so what is the problem of putting food into treif kalim? It seems it's not bolea because the food you're putting on is cold. Are we concerned about greasy residue? Or if so, when the Mechaber writes that kosher cooked meat on an aser plate is aser lechatchila, is that only where the plate has not been washed? And if it has been washed, because if it has been washed, then there won't be any residue. So ultimately the question boils down to what is the fundamental problem of putting food onto treif kalim? So let's hear from the panel.
What's the problem with putting?
What's the problem with putting food onto treif plates?
You said that they have to be
It's
clean. You have to clean them.
Because so the question is, so one of the things is that
residue.
residue.
Right.
Okay. What else could
left on the plate?
say that again, Donna?
The residue of whatever was eaten on
Yeah.
that plate.
Right. So we said there's one problem.
kosher.
So one problem is residue over here. Okay. So the answer is either, as you said, it wasn't washed properly, or else that that the non-Jews kli must be washed and scrubbed. In which case we're speaking about where it was washed but not properly scrubbed. Okay, so basically it comes down to the residue. There was actually a point I just remembered now that was quite interesting, which is when you have a treif kli that was purchased from a non-Jew, and you've got to do two things with it. One, you've got to kosher it, and two, you've got to toivel it. Okay, before you're allowed to use it. Now, are you allowed to toivel it before you've koshered it?
Toivel it before you kosher.
I wouldn't think so.
Why would you say not?
You would have to kosher it properly before you toiveled it.
But you're going to be making a bracha over it anyway in the first place. If it's not
Okay, so you're making a bracha over it, but there are two things. One, the mikveh is to transfer the ownership. It's like, you know, you're converting the kli from a goyish kli into a Jewish kli. Let's just look at it that way. There's a ritual obligation to put it in the mikveh. So let's say we're talking about a cooking pot. Okay, you're going to have to kosher it, but you also need to put it in the mikveh. Now let's say that you want to take this kli, and for the meantime you just want to store some fruit in it. But now you can't store fruit in it until you've taken it to mikveh, but you don't have the time to kosher it just yet. So let's say you just want to take it to the mikveh first. Can you do that?
Meaning this pot, if you never really cooked in it ever, the fact that you just toiveled it, that could be enough, you're saying, to use it for something cold.
For something cold. Yeah.
For non right.
Right. I mean, obviously, you know, to go to the mikveh, it has to be clean, because if it's not clean, then there's a chatzitza and it hasn't really gone to mikveh. So you've cleaned it properly, but you haven't yet kashed it. So there's I mean, it's a machlokas whether you can do this, but nonetheless there is a day that you can toivel first, because you can, and the reason is because you can use it for cold. And so, you know, for a short time, you can't have this on a permanent basis, because if you have a treif pot sitting in your kitchen, somebody's going to empty out the apples and say, oh, you know, let me use this to do some cooking.
I once heard that someone said that if you got this pot and you didn't have time to toivel it, and you really need to, you have to use it. You can't help it. You could use it one time, and then after that you have to toivel it. I don't know if that holds water. Really. That's a bad pun. I didn't mean that.
That may be so. I've heard this. Yeah.
I once heard it's not. I heard that once before, and then I asked the Rav. I mean, I can't verify. Maybe Shal verify, but I remember hearing that it doesn't hold bars. You know that.
Yeah, it's certainly not something that you wanna like get into. It's.
In fact, if you have a glass bottle or something, you buy seltzer, you buy a drink. As far as I understood, you could, like, if let's say you finish the bottle, you want to put another drink in it or refill it. As far as I know, you can't do that.
No, that I've heard. That I've definitely heard differently. That there's I had this exact shiloh. I bought a jar of olives, And afterwards, having finished the olives, I wanted to use the jar again to store. Then I bought olives in a can, and I wanted to empty the olives into the clean. I thought, hold on a second, maybe these olives came from Italy or whatever, and it was made by a non-Jewish manufacturer. And now, do I need to take the olive jar to mikveh? So it's interesting that the lomdus of this was amazing. That when beforehand, it was an olive container, and you, the Jew, were completed the kli by opening it out and emptying out the previous things. And I can't remember exactly the lomdus, but it was something about the fact that you, as a Jew, you completed the kli by taking it and opening it and eating the olives the original olives that were inside it. And now now that the whole tikkun kli was done by a Jew, it doesn't need mikveh anymore.
Would that be different though by maybe olives is more of a food, maybe a drink would be different, like a little bottle of seltzer or kedem grape juice bottle or something? Would that be different? Snapple. Or you can say, yes, Snapple, right? Yeah. Would that be the same? Would that be the same idea, or like a drink?
Because it's the same svara. I also heard a different svara that it's being given to you as a sort of a secondary thing. You wouldn't buy the bottle by itself. You bought it because of the contents. Okay. So because you bought the bottle for its contents, you didn't buy it for the glass. But now that you've got it, okay, you want to reuse it. So because it came the bottle came agav the food, it's not chashuv enough to require it to be learned. It came into being as a separate kli, again under your own rishus. Okay.
Hey, yes.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Thanks again.
Stay safe all.
Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.